Okay, hi Steph. Good to see you this morning.
Right.
This is actually for people watching our second attempt to do a studio chat because last time there was a construction work outside Steph's studio. Steph is in Bordeaux in her studio, and I'm in at home in London. And we're going to talk about Steph's most recent and ongoing body of paintings, Lusitania. And you can see some of the paintings on the wall behind her, and we'll add a video scan of that wall so you can get a closer look. So I think I'll just start off by asking Steph, rather than kind of holding forth, I'll just ask you, just to give you a rough idea of how you stumbled across these images and what triggered your interest and where you thought you might want to take them.
Right. Okay. Hi, Gavin.
Hi.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to just before the first lockdown, 2020, really around that time, and I was sort of just browsing online, and the Lusitania story had captured my imagination for a while. And I stumbled on these shots of cabins. I've actually got these are sort of what I'm working from. Like,
Oh, wow, I haven't seen these before.
oh
Wow.
yeah, no, these are the shots,
Yeah.
and they are so stark,
Yeah.
they're so empty, and I think they were all shot the same day, same light, same photographer, same height, same everything. They're very, very uh, kind of similar in the way that I mean, this one's a bit reduced. I'll open it up. Some I've been working on a sort of portrait format, and you can see in these how the everything, the cover, the curtains are all folded, are all set, hooked back in exactly the same way. Nobody's been on board yet. You know, everything is absolutely perfect, and there's this sort of sense of an ideal of order in them. And there's this repetition of the way that everything is laid out. The chairs are put in a certain way, or the everything that can be moved, the furniture is set up similarly in each room, and there's this complete lack of humanity about it, and that kind of intrigued me, because I said, well, what are these? There's so many of them as well, and I think they were for the brochure, and it's mostly the first class quarters, the cabins, but there's also some of the second class, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell which is first and second, because you just get this small window, you know, to see these through, and sometimes you can't really see how sumptuous it is, and other times you see you know, doorways off into large salons and dining rooms and sumptuous four-poster bedrooms, and it's obvious that you know. But then there's also some photos of the third class quarters, which are very, 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 very different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unmistakable.
Mm.
And apparently, just to go off on a tangent, because I've even forgotten what the question was now, but the tangent is third class passengers really paid for the first class, because those first class suites cost so much money to make that they made a loss on those, and they made the money back from all the third class tickets.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before, and I think that actually leads quite nicely to the next question, because so this is Lusitania, which is similar to Titanic, a sort of
Yes.
a sort of flagship liner, and it was, I believe, torpedoed by the German Navy in 1916, just off the coast, the west coast of Ireland, off Cork, if I'm not wrong. And I thought you wrote a really wonderful article, which we'll link here in. I thought it was a wonderful piece in the Glasfryn Glasfryn project. And you quote a lot from Walter Benjamin. And what I want to ask you about is in relation to those quotes, because what you talk about his mirrors writings and his writings in the Arcades project. So in all your paintings, you've got kind of, as you just mentioned, repeat elements. So for example, as you said, the curtain, and we can see behind you, the curtain is pulled back in exactly the same way in each painting. There are doors leading to doors. So there's, in quite a lot of the images, and the ones above your head, there's a sense of infinite space, of a space that will never end. Yeah, those two top right. There's also quite a lot of use of mirrors, and there are mirrors reflecting mirrors. So there's something I know is a lot, which is the mise en abîme, the placing into the abyss. And finally, there is the fact that there are no views out of the window. These very sort of sealed in spaces. Right, it's a very long question. What I want to ask you was, because what Benjamin talks about is very much some of those elements in terms of the political context at the end of, just coming up to the First World War, and the end of the Age of Prosperity, the end of the Victorian and Edwardian eras in Europe. And quite a lot of his writings, there's a quote at the end of your article from him, where he talks about European society, and he says, if I find the quote, nevertheless, the pomp and the splendor with which commodity producing society surrounds itself, as well as its illusory sense of security, are not immune to dangers. And that's a chapter from Paris, the capital of the 19th century. So there's a sense perhaps of hubris of this kind of splendor and these empty spaces for a brochure. And we know, of course, that that ship and many of the people on it met a terrible end, and during the First World War, which signaled the end of a whole lengthy period of prosperity in certainly in Europe.
Yeah.
Now, what I really want to ask you, which we really didn't get to the bottom of last time, is the interplay between that political context and the personal context, because you also mentioned Bachelard quite a lot in the poetry space, where he's interested in the psychology of space, perhaps more from a personal perspective, of phenomenological perspective. So what do you think about that play between, are these political paintings, or are they personal paintings, or are they both?
Yes, well, they're both, because there's that I find that Benjamin quote's really interesting, because that whole book is about how it's not that dissimilar from Bachelard, because it's about how space functions, and they're not as polarized as that, because that how space functions, knowledge of how space functions, allows us to be manipulated by it. And that's what the start of consumer culture was in these arcades, where you would take a street and put a roof on it, a glass roof, because that was the new technology at the time, was these great big glass domed ceilings. And then you would keep the natural light, and then you would create shops as if you were creating a theatre presentation of a street. So where there was already a street, you create a theatrical street.
Yeah.
These levels of meaning, that you walk into a theatre, and you expect to receive something, a narrative of some sort. That's what the arcades are doing, and that's exactly what the hotels are doing, and that's what these sumptuous cabins are doing, because you walk in and you are immediately a passenger with a role, and that role is to navigate these spaces where you feel completely safe, because everything looks like it does on land. Everything looks as solid as it does on land, and there's no reason on earth to believe it isn't, apart from the fact it isn't. And the horror of the story of the Lusitania is that in 20 minutes, it's all gone. And all those details, when you look at the amount of detail, every single light is made of sort of sandblasted glass with little, sort of patterning in metal, and everything is made with such attention to detail. And then it all finishes up sort of flat packed at the bottom of the ocean. And I think that the phenomenology
I always struggle with that word.
of space, the Bashar is sort of at the heart of how we're able to be manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
That I think I'm not sure I even used in that was we need something closed to hold our memories. Talking about cupboards and lockets and drawers and things, how we guard our memories safe, our souvenirs in these little spaces. And I think that's partly what these little paintings are about. These are like little lockets almost, you're sort of guarding the memory of this event.
Right. Okay. So there is a political, obviously a dimension that very specifically relates to what actually happened in these rooms, and
yes,
it's also something else, and there's perhaps a wider thing about our own sense of insecurity, that our own security will crumble and is on a knife edge in a way. Is that right?
Yes, I think all my work has this sort of double narrative. I hate the word narrative. This double kind of meaning to it within it, where you've got always something, a personal, probably a fear of mine to do with confinement, in terms of I've got a particular fear of those because I've been the dream houses, which I did before, which was how we got talking about common ground in our work. Those dream house pieces were very much about the recent history of the migrants crossing the Mediterranean, and it was like the first class, second class, third class. If you didn't have enough money and you could only pay a very small amount, you went in the hold of the boat, where most huge amount of people died from suffocation from the engine fumes. They suffocated to death under the fumes, or they were the first to drown when it started to take in water. So it was already too late for most of those people by the time they were discovered, and those spaces had to be drained, and so that sort of I have this horror of situations like that in my own mind, obviously, because I keep coming back to those sorts of situations and being very able to put myself imaginatively in that position and feel terrified by it. So there's something personal about that. Otherwise, it wouldn't fascinate me. I think.
Yeah, I think I would guess that's to be the case. Yeah, and it would also then relate to you because you are so interested in the idea of the mise en Abyme, the mirror is reflecting a mirror, and to a kind of terrifying infinity. And also the claustrophobia and the sense of the ominous. There is something else though, and in fact you mentioned it just now, which I think I'd like to ask you about, because you mentioned the earlier paintings, which when we first got to know each other, you met the refugee ships that are sunk to the bottom of the Mediterranean, and apparently similar themes. It's a thing about tribute. You mentioned putting the objects into like lockets or into drawers, putting memories into drawers, because you first of all with these paintings made a series of watercolors that are much more ephemeral, and then the paintings, the old paintings behind you are much more, at first glance, much more physical. And you've really gone to town on the sticky varnish, the tactile quality of those slightly oppressive kind of Edwardian rooms. But then actually, I think it came out last time when we were talking, the more I looked at them, the more I realized there was actually a gentleness, a kind of caress in them. And so I suppose probably the last question I wanted to ask you about was whether you do see them like the Mediterranean paintings, perhaps as well as a form of tribute or memorialization. to the particular events?
Well, yes, I think there's an awful lot of stuff in that event that is. I think injustice is something a memorial to injustice probably.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of a positive kind of propaganda about these vessels, that how safe they were and how it was all going to be fine. When they knew full well there was a huge risk, and they took the risk for the profit. They couldn't afford not to send the ships because they cost so much to make. It was brand new practically. They had to make their profit, and to they couldn't afford to give back the money. I don't think that's, if they and they let them sail, knowing full well that there's a very strong chance that they might not arrive at the other end, and all sorts of other things that I won't go into now. Because too like all of that is this sense of an ongoing problem in society of the ruling classes, making decisions that essentially only profit themselves and at the expense of everybody else, and people being manipulated by these, partly these images, these promotional images, which at the time, were quite sumptuous. So I think for me, there's always a sense of tribute, and criticism as well, and frustration, that nothing changes and everything is still just as unfair, if not more, and and nothing, it just the whole the painting for me is a way to contact with and understand the world. I don't seem to be able to do that through other means. I seem to be able to need to paint to make contact with the world. And so there's tribute, but there's all sorts of other things that I'm trying to encapsulate for myself, and whatever the image turns out to be, I kind of get a feeling when it's done its job. But, I can't sort of scientifically explain why it has done its job. I just feel that it's, again, that says what I mean to say.
I mean,
and that's why there's so many of them.
Because you're trying to find that real meaning or the real expression.
Oh, frozen there. Sorry. Say that again.
Because you're trying to find that best expression, or that close expression.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That really, that's a wonderful answer. Thank you. I mean, we're getting towards the end of our time anyway. And we didn't get there last time. That's so interesting, actually. That's really great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left, Steph, and we're going to run out of our time. We'll get cut off. Anything else you want to add? Or feel we haven't covered?
No, I think that'll do, because I think that's really great. I think we needed that first one where we had all the banging noises in the background in order to get to the real meat of things in the second one, and that's really good. I'm really pleased that we did that. And so I will add a zoom around of the studio, the paintings to go with it, so we can see all the images.
Great. Okay, thanks. And I'll put up a link to the Glasfryn project article that I mentioned earlier on. And apologies to everyone for the occasional
really great
reception, but otherwise, and I'll see you in London. We're going to go to the Sicket together, possibly.
We'll go to the Sicket. Fantastic.
lots more politics in class. All right.
Politics class.
Great. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.